Tonight, the confusing saga about whether ISIS is or isn't defeated. It just got a whole lot more confusing, in fact, because the U.S. military announced late last night that it's dropped nearly 80,000 bombs on a single island believed to be holding ISIS fighters in Iraq. 80,000 bombs. Take a look at this. This is an attack of biblical proportions in a rather biblical setting, by the way, the banks of the Tigris River. F-15s, F-35 fighter jets absolutely destroy the area, believed to have been holding militants in the northern part of the country. Again, this despite claims that ISIS had been defeated. Now, the mushroom clouds that you're looking at right there, look at the size of these things. Look at the frequency. They could be seen from miles away and no doubt put smiles on the defense contractors here in Washington who are thrilled to see their bombs and weapons being used, which now means they get to make more of them and you and I get to pay for them. Most of this massive bombing took place in Iraq, the war that, by the way, we were promised would end in maybe just a matter of weeks, and where our troops would be hailed and celebrated as heroes and liberators, and the entire region would be democratized because of our actions there. Let me remind you that that promise to us was made in 2003 when the Iraq War started, and still we fight, both in Iraq and in neighboring Syria. Joining us now from Damascus, Syria, is Max Blumenthal. He is the editor of the Grayzone project. He's also the author of a very well-known and well-received book, The Management of Savagery. Max, thanks so much for joining us. The big news this week, obviously, John Bolton gone, fired. I'm wondering how that's being received there in Syria, given that he's been very much a hawk when it comes to Syria.
Anyone I've spoken to in Syria who's aware of Bolton being removed is pretty happy about it. Bolton is considered the person who has prevented Trump from rolling back the U.S. troop presence in Syria. Syria is now facing an unprecedented economic war. It's essentially under siege from the outside, thanks in large part to the U.S. presence on the Syrian-Iraqi border, which is preventing cross-border trade, and the presence of U.S.-backed Kurdish militias in the northeast, which are basically controlling a lot of Syria's oil fields and preventing Syria from accessing its own oil, which left a lot of people literally in the dark or in the cold last winter. So Bolton is considered someone who has directly affected the lives of millions of Syrians for the worse. And the people I've spoken to who are aware of his resignation are definitely enthused.
When you talk to the people there, Max, what do the people in Damascus say or think about the United States and our military's involvement there? Does anyone actually believe that the U.S. has had a positive impact on the country?
You know, like as in Venezuela, as in the Gaza Strip, as in many places I've gone that are under U.S. sanctions, people here do not hate the American people. They don't speak that way. They do resent the way the U.S. government has participated in an arm and equip program that has literally put Wahhabi militias in the immediate midst of Damascus. Yesterday, I walked out of a Christian area in the old city, walked across a highway, and went into a semi-abandoned area which had been occupied for 4 months by a Saudi-backed militia called Jaish al-Islam, the Army of Islam. And I spoke to some residents who had lived under that occupation, and they told me how a little Saudi Arabia was basically created almost in the middle of Damascus, on the outskirts of Damascus, and a harsh theocratic rule was imposed. People were executed for violating it. Women were disappeared and raped. Food was stolen and sold back to the people at higher prices. The one person I spoke to said it was like living in a prison for 4 years, and that was the U.S. partner, Saudi Arabia, which was financing a lot of the U.S. arms that flowed into the country. And now Syria is facing an economic war. A local businessman told me the U.S. pushed a button this year and destroyed our economy. Those were his exact words. So I think there is a lot of resentment to the U.S. government. They're not exactly spreading democracy and freedom here.
You know, Max, we've been getting reports that the Syrian government has advanced a great deal and that the armed opposition is down to running only in a few small pockets of the country. Are we reaching an end game here?
Yeah, the end of the armed conflict is definitely near. There is a sense of confidence throughout the country that this will be over soon. The Syrian government wants to retake every inch of Idlib and actually now believes that it will be able to, that for whatever reason, Turkish President Recep Erdogan has given up on his interest in Idlib and is no longer providing the logistical, financial, and military support to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the al-Qaeda affiliate in Idlib right now. The battle is still hard, and I was told actually by an Army veteran that more people are being lost than are being reported. But the war is essentially over, and now we're moving into a new phase, which is the U.S. economic war, where actual ships full of oil are being blocked and impounded under U.S. orders that would have provided heating oil and fuel to average Syrian people. And so the war continues by different means, and people are speaking about 2019, the year the war ended, as actually the worst year because the economy is in a state of collapse, thanks directly to U.S. sanctions.
Finally, Max, I got to ask you about the role of Turkey in all of this. We pretty much understand Russia's role, the United States' role as adversaries in this conflict, but what's Turkey looking for? What's their end game?
Well, Turkey, the Turkish government, is probably the most hated government in Syria, at least in the areas that the Syrian government controls. The Syrian government certainly hates it. And it's because Turkey maintained a border that was used to send weapons, U.S.-funded weapons, Saudi weapons, into the country that were used to kill hundreds of thousands of people, possibly, or to fuel the conflict. ISIS was able to cross in and out of Turkey. And in the city of Aleppo, which is not far from the Turkish border, in the areas controlled by Turkish-backed militias like Ahrar al-Sham and Nuruddin al-Zinki, factories were actually dismantled and taken across the Turkish border and reassembled there to destroy the industrial base of Aleppo. Turkey gave up on those militias in 2016, and the area was retaken. And now Turkey appears to be giving up on Idlib and moving into a different phase. So the question is not what Turkey wants as much as what kind of future relationship Erdogan will have with Assad, someone he was very close to before the war. And I think as much as this government in Syria despises what Turkey did to it, they're going to have to patch up relations because of the intensity of U.S. sanctions, which are also threatening Turkey's economy as well.
Max Blumenthal reporting for us from Damascus, Syria. Stay safe, Max. So you haven't heard that we're the ones covering the stories that you won't see covered anywhere else? In Venezuela, Kazakhstan, let's go to Hong Kong. And the media reaction to that has been crickets. How about the way we cover those stories? What the hell does that mean? Wowee, wowee, wowee. That's the key word in this case, uprising. Keep? Can you believe that? Watching. This is the right thing for members of the media to do, to actually pick sides. Look, if you like what you see, subscribe.